Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brent Nicol, and I'm an agriculture conservation practitioner with the Nature Conservancy. So a little bit of background about myself. I started off my career in ag retail in Central Ohio as a salesman. In addition to selling during the couple of years that I was there, I handled most of the precision ag work, such as variable rate fertilizer recs, field mapping, and some drone work. After my time at that location, I ended up working in a different ag retail location in North Central Ohio as a precision ag specialist and selling a little on the side still, but doing mostly VRT recs, soil sampling, working with yield data, and then again, some drone work. So now obviously I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and not only do I get to look at in-field management like I've always done, but now I get to look at edge of field and beyond field management. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about how to communicate with your customers about high soil test phosphorus. So we're going to cover knowing the farmers you're working with and how to influence that conversation if a conservation opportunity arises. Next, we'll discuss the customer NSP relationship, nutrient service provider relationship, and how you can add value to your client. And then we'll look at how you can support their needs as their trusted advisor. So I'm going to have a few Zoom poll results throughout this presentation, which were kept anonymous and were taken during a separate recording. So these Zoom poll results will help us get a feel for how our NSP participants voted regarding some of these poll questions. So just starting out, a poll is open to gauge this NSP audience presented to. So with the first question being, do you currently address Lvdp fields with your clients? And if so, how? The results of this question shows that the majority, roughly 58% of polled nutrient service providers offered precision fertility solutions via soil sampling. And 21% of that majority group, of that 58%, they also provide agronomic information for in-field management to mitigate high phosphorus issues. So the remaining 42% of respondents were split between only offering in-field agronomic information for high P issues, not addressing Lvdp with clients, discussing edge of field management, which was only about 5% of polled nutrient service providers, and the others answered other. So what can we learn from this first question? It's that there is an opportunity for NSPs to diversify themselves with knowledge and information on conservation at the edge of field. The second question the poll asked, what do you perceive as barriers to addressing Lvdp fields and best management practices with your clients? 58% of NSP respondents answered, my clients do not express concern about Lvdp areas. Also, 30% of respondents answered other. So when figuring out what those other responses were, the NSPs answered that landlords could be seen as a barrier. So the consensus was that short-term rental by the farmer makes it hard to make that commitment, as well as that the farmer doesn't want to hurt that relationship with their landlord. So what we can learn from question number 2 is that the majority of NSPs, according to these polling results, believe that their clients do not express concern about Lvdp areas. As an NSP, this could be an opportunity to show a value add, which would be as the person who is knowledgeable agronomically to receive information from regarding elevated phosphorus. So this is a chart that was pulled from survey data collected in 2017. So the gray bars that say have used practice in the past year refers to the 2016 growing season, and the red bars that denote next year refers to the 2017 growing season. So information is a few years old, but I think it's still relevant in providing a good example. The y-axis indicates percent of respondents that reported using the practice within the last year, as well as those who will likely or definitely use in the next year. From what we see from the results of this poll, farmers who are polled are interested in these practices, but they do need support in implementation. So if it isn't you, are there people that you can put them in contact with? As far as putting your client in contact with someone who can help, I'm just going to put in a quick plug for one of our other projects. It's called Farmer Advocates for Conservation. This program offers peer-to-peer learning opportunities with a group of conservation-minded farmers that are located throughout the Western Lake Erie Basin. So if you go to farmeradvocatesforconservation.com, you will be able to find a farmer advocate that is located nearest to you. Other points of contact other than this group of farmers would be your county SWCD, the Farm Service Agency, your local NRCS contact, the ODNR H2 Ohio program, and the Ohio Department of Ag. Okay, so in 2018, Robin Wilson, who is a social scientist at Ohio State, conducted research that set out to identify what beliefs are critical to behavioral change, as well as likelihood that a farmer would adopt management practices. And management practices believed to be critical in reducing nutrient loading to Lake Erie. From this research, we learned that 90% of the farmers surveyed are willing to take additional action to reduce nutrient loss. Research also showed an older demographic, as well as those with more rented acres, were less likely to be willing to adopt a new management practice to reduce nutrient loss. We also learned that 30 to 40% of the farmers surveyed were not only willing to take additional action, but motivated enough to implement the practices. So knowing this, what factors are driving adoption? We learned it was self-efficacy as well as response efficacy. So confidence in the farmer's ability to implement the practice, as well as a belief that the practice is effective. From the survey results, we know that obviously the farmer has good intentions, but they need a little help or resources to believe that the practice is effective, as well as to successfully implement it. If we are able to capitalize on their good intentions, we could potentially have a large positive influence on adoption. Okay, so two often studied categories when discussing farmer identity are conservationist identity and productionist identity. A conservation-minded farmer being one who holds more value toward things like soil health and water quality, and a production-minded farmer holding more value toward something like highest yield per acre, as an example. But farmers can hold both types of identity. They're not mutually exclusive. So at this point, a poll was opened with 3 different questions. The first question being, as an NSP, do you box the farmer into a production-minded or a conservation-minded person? The respondents' answers were just about evenly split, with 53% answering no, they do not box the farmer into a production or conservation-minded bubble. The second question was, does this influence your conversation and approach with that client? Which again, answers were just about evenly split, with 53% of respondents answering yes, this does influence their approach with that client. The last question from this poll was, in your opinion, what makes a good farmer? Answers were pretty well spread out across the board, as you can see in that chart in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. But the option answered the most was utilizes a robust program with leading edge products when it comes to chemistry, fertility, et cetera. So from this poll, it can help us reiterate that, of course, as NSPs, we tailor our strategies and conversations to our clients' interests. We can also see from the question, what makes a good farmer, that a little over half of polled NSPs believe that a good farmer uses the best products and programs that the ag industry offers. So I think it's important to note that, yes, using leading edge products is a good tactic when discussing utilization and efficacy of what you're putting out there, right? Especially when talking about chemistry and fertility. But we need to make sure that these top of the line products are conservation minded and that they're the best choice for the farmer. Okay, so does your perception of your client's mindset as an NSP influence the way that you communicate with them? For sales in general, you tailor the conversation to the individual, right? But also as NSPs, do we consistently find ourselves talking mostly about yield? And how do we shift that? So from here, we opened up our third poll, which asked the NSPs the question, thinking about your clients you have the closest relationships with, do you feel you have a significant influence on their farming practices? The answer to that question was a unanimous yes, that NSPs believe that they have a significant influence on their clients' farming practices. So I remember when I was getting trained as a salesman, I was told that my job was farming, but without actually getting into the tractor. And that as a salesman in retail, I needed to be knowledgeable on the products, obviously, and how they work, as well as know the client's operation and farming practices. The second question asked was, do you feel it is your responsibility to have a positive conservation influence on the farms of your clients? 95% of the respondents answered yes. They believe that, they believe that they do have a responsibility to have a positive conservation influence on their clients. The third question asked was, do you feel you are doing what you can to have a positive conservation influence, or is it something that you need to work on? 89% of the respondents answered that they are doing what they can to make a positive influence, while 11% said it is something they need to work on or get more educated on. I think that the answer to this question number 3 can tell us that NSPs have good intentions and they're trying to make a positive influence with these clients that they have built relationships with. It also can tell us that we should be actively trying to be educated on conservation practices, because it can be valuable knowledge as an NSP when talking to your clients. So I think it's important to note, doing the right thing for your customer's farm and communicating authentically can go a long way. And once you have that trust and rapport built, the conversation doesn't always have to revolve around product and yield. Discussing conservation and longevity of the farm can be a really useful retention method. So you aren't always talking about product when you have those interactions. I remember another portion of my sales training. So we talked about learning what made that farmer tick. Is he an equipment guy or an agronomy guy? Does he like hunting and fishing? Is he a big whiskey or bourbon person, and so on? I think that can apply to conservation and the land as well. It can be important to know what makes him tick. I also would like to say that as we move forward, obviously in ag retail, you need to be profitable, right? And that includes selling product. But I think we all have an ethical responsibility to do what's right for the farmer and their farm, as well as the land. So, which is what farmers and NSPs are constantly striving to do. For my time in ag retail, I never came across anyone with bad intentions, and we're all, striving to do the right thing. Okay, so the next few slides will provide suggestions for how you can help meet clients' needs depending on their willingness to try innovative practices. So from what we know from research is that new ideas spread throughout a population over time rather than all at once, eventually leading to widespread adoption, which probably comes at no surprise. But the important piece of information to take from this diffusion of innovation is that different groups have different needs when it comes to adopting new ideas. So as far as different groups, we have innovators. Innovators who are the ones who embrace new ideas and technologies and likely don't need to be encouraged. But they need the expertise of their trusted advisor to help make sure that they're successful. If you think about your clients, are there certain people that fall into this category? And if there is a client, how are you offering value to their operation? Then we have early adopters. They are not on the forefront of trying new things like the innovators, but they are some of the very first people to try out different ideas when presented to them. They need information on logistics of new ideas, but don't necessarily need to be convinced or have that strong push. When you think about your clients, do you have any that fall into this bucket? And how are you adding value to this operation? Then we have middle adopters. This group of people needs to see success with new practices or ideas, and it takes time for them to be completely on board. Oftentimes they are influenced by the innovators or early adopters. So going back to my plug on the farmer advocates for conservation, who I would really consider those innovators or early adopters, they would be a great resource if you have clients you would consider middle adopters who need additional information from their peers. So when thinking about your clients, do any of them fall into this category of middle adopters? And if they do, how are you adding value to this operation? And last, we have the late adopters. So this group tends to wait until everyone else has adopted a new idea or practice. In general, they're skeptical of change, but are often swayed by peer pressure. So this group is usually more difficult to sell to as an NSP, and they tend to take a lot of influence to try something new. So at this point, we opened up poll number 4 for the NSPs, which asked, when thinking about your total client base, where would you place the majority of your clients if you had to put them into a category? 72% of respondents answered middle adopters, which is accurate if we were to look at a bell curve where the majority of the clients out there land in that middle. The second question asked was, thinking about your best customers, in what box would you place them if you had to label them one of these adopter types? So your best customers. Unsurprisingly, the majority of the respondents answered innovators and early adopters. So when thinking about your clients, these are your MVPs. Most of the time, the best clients are the ones who are progressive and actively trying different things on the farm. These are the ones that, as retailers, we work to retain, and offering them value to the operation by talking about conservation and the longevity of their farm can help build trust within that relationship, as well as really aid in retaining those MVP customers. So I also want to point out, going back to the phosphorus discussion in part 1, it's not just about addressing areas with not enough fertilizer. It's about properly managing those with nutrient excess as well. How do we communicate this in a way that's not too preachy, and what can we do to add value to their farm? Another tactic is increased farmer networking, maybe through field days or arranging an exclusive farmer group within your client base. As an example of that, from my time in retail, we had started a group called Crop Camp, which was an invitation to our most progressive farmers to join in a small group to discuss their farming practices, what's working and what's not working, and to share new ideas or bounce ideas off each other. This program, though it was a lot of work with lining up speakers and content, was very successful at fostering an interconnected relationship between our client base, which in turn made them feel like part of our organization's team. So, like mentioned in the last slide, we should manage high P and low P areas as areas of concern. As their trusted advisor, this can be done through something like a nutrient management plan. And as a farmer, if I knew I had an area of elevated phosphorus with, let's say, 150 parts per million, I would want to utilize and retain as much of that nutrient as possible in my field rather than see it leave the field, especially with input prices the way they are today. So for the last poll that we opened up for these NSPs, we asked them what they took away from this discussion to carry forward into their work with their customers. 58% of respondents answered that they would add value by discussing phosphorus and nutrient management with their customers. So as an NSP, I think it's important to be able to have those types of conversations with your customers. And if you aren't the resource that the customer goes to for information on conservation related topics, then someone else is. And being that first point of contact for these kinds of conversations can be a great value add and retention tool. So in summary, providing additional resources can also help increase efficacy, which is a big factor in driving adoption of conservation practices. Two types of efficacy that we discussed were self-efficacy, which is the belief that you are capable of implementing a specific conservation practice, and response efficacy, which is a belief that the conservation practice is effective at reducing nutrient loss. These resources can come from peer-to-peer connections through a farmer networking web, from research, from information on implementation and cost share programs, and especially from knowledge and help from that farmer's trusted advisor. And there's my contact information. Thank you.